People who've seen someone get fired on the first day, why were they fired? Story 1. Worked in a chemical plant as QC. To make it short, I was one of the chemists who checked if the products were good enough to leave the plant. A guy working in production came for his first day. He took his break and he lit a cigarette next to a 10,000 liters acetone tank. He was out before I could even blink an eye. My dad worked in a battery manufacturing plant that had a whole storage area for acetone, amongst other things. That was locked behind some heavy doors that you need to stand on a special machine in order to remove any static electricity from your body in order to even open. One day, he, a supervisor, and some other guy were walking through this storage area when said other guy took out a lighter and started absent-mindedly flicking the ignition like some kind of fidget toy. Sacked on the spot. Story 2. Was in the local Walmart needing to take a leak. Walked into the bathroom to a manager and employees staring down a stall covered in poop. The manager was explaining to the dude that cleaning poop is in the job description. The guy responded, "Well, I'm sorry that this is my first day, but screw that," and walked out. I've been there, worked at a popular siren coffee shop, and we often had a mentally ill customer come in and Picasso the walls with their poop. Wasn't my first day, but my supervisor said, "We waited for you to come in at 4 to clean it." Took one look, told them it was unsanitary for me to clean with the tools provided, and suggested we call the hazmat cleanup team, as I was specifically told we used to handle this poop. The supervisor, for whatever reason, didn't want to and cleaned it herself. She was also a thief and was taking tips from the whole team. Didn't feel bad in the slightest. The same thing happened to me once. I was working at the Salvation Army thrift doing donations and got paged over the store intercom, which never happens. I go to the back and see what's up, and am told that a kid pooped himself in the book section and his mom made him sit down until she was done looking at the books. When he got up, he somehow smeared poop all over the shelves and books, and it was all over the floor, etc., and that it was my job to clean it up. It was a huge mess of poop all over the whole section pretty much. I looked the floor manager dead in the eye, removed my vest, opened my locker, and said, "Well, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your life. I can put up with a lot of abuse, but I won't clean up someone's poop for $10 an hour." I put my vest in there and went home for the day. I came back the next shift and nobody said anything to me at all. I wasn't fired, and other than some of my friends there telling me that the floor manager had to clean it herself after everyone else refused, nothing really happened about it. Apparently her idea of cleaning it up was throwing out about 500 books and 4 shelving units into the dumpster out back. I worked in a place where the cleaners had a contractual bonus of 30 pounds if they had to clean poop or vomit or other bodily fluids from walls, floors, etc. It was worded so they couldn't try to claim it for routine stuff like cleaning skid marks off the toilet or whatever. One day, someone had explosive diarrhea all over the back of the toilet, which I had the pleasure of seeing as I was the unlucky person who found it. The cleaning contract manager tried to screw them out of their bonus because the poop was technically still on the toilet, so claimed it wasn't eligible as technically wasn't on the walls or floor. It was all under the seat and cistern, and I'm talking a lot of it. Whoever it was must have been in a really bad state, and got there literally just in time and exploded while in the process of sitting down. Everyone in the office heard about this and kicked up a huge fuss, and we all made sure the cleaner actually got their bonus, which thankfully they did in the end. Story 3. Homeboy was allowed to play music on Bluetooth for the restaurant on the first day. Went to the bathroom and started watching porn and forgot he was still on the speakers. Hilarity and dismissal ensued. A similar thing happened at a cafe I worked at years ago. The EFTPOST system went down during a lunch rush, causing a little freakout in front of the house as they had customers waiting to pay who needed to get back to work. They finally figured out someone had used up all the data that the system relied on, got everything back online, and got through the lunch rush. After service, the FOH team went full sleuth mode trying to figure out how they went through so much more data than normal. I think there were 2 different Wi-Fi setups, a standard one for customers, but a specific higher speed one for the POS, so it didn't need a high data cap. I don't really know how they figured it out, because if it were me, I would take this secret to my grave, but it turns out someone had given the password to the kitchen hand who then used it to watch porn in the bathroom. He was a bit of a weird dude, one of those older guys who have worked there longer than anyone else but don't really talk to anyone there, always a wee bit disheveled. He would mutter to himself under his breath when walking behind you, but always got the job done and was overall harmless. I think he just admitted to it because it didn't really register to him not to. Anyway, he didn't get fired. I think they just changed the password and told him not to do it again, and made a That's just Brett shruggy face. Sometimes kitchen hand turnover is so high, I guess you just deal with the weirdo who never leaves instead. I used to work with a guy who told us he got in trouble with his wife one time. He got in the car with their 2 young kids. He started it up and his phone was connected to the stereo via Bluetooth, and it was set to start playing at the last point he was listening/watching something, which of course happened to be porn. Sounds of mid-porno blasting out the car stereo, kids crying, wife furious. Said he tried to play it off as a YouTube video of Grand Theft Auto, and the sound was from when you pick up hookers in the game. Strangely enough, she did not believe him. Story 4. On the afternoon of his first day as a developer, he was noticed downloading the source code of our main product app from the source control system to a personal USB stick. Said he wanted to take it home and mess with it in his spare time. 1, this was after he'd signed the IT security policy to say he wouldn't, and they made sure people read it. 2, this was also in the mid-teens in a company that really didn't like work from home. Our nearest solution was an RDP gateway into an on-prem physical desktop, and that was mostly an extreme weather option. The chief exec hated the concept of people not being in the office. 3, they were a small-scale developer, organic growth from a 2-man company over about 10 years that suddenly had to ramp up to a much larger set of developers, partly to update the tech stack, and was hiring fast and starting fast. It took a while for infrastructure security to catch up. In fact, this was partly the incident that kick-started the catch-up. 4, I don't work there anymore. Average 20% below market rate. Pay really bites. Was he fresh out of school? If so, I can understand how that mistake could be made. He was probably trying to be proactive and probably didn't know that that's a no-no if it was his first day. At the same time, I'm not sure why the USB port wasn't disabled. Both companies I've worked at so far either didn't have a USB port at all on the laptop or it was disabled. While I understand the implications for some companies, as a developer who works 100% remotely and has full repo access, this defo isn't a screw-up in my very large company. Development of apps often involves checking out folks or certain branches. Training often involves reading through elements of the code to get familiar. They should have just managed the situation and spoken to him if they were that scared of him breaching his contract. SWE of 10 years here. Firing someone over this is super extreme unless someone has just made that point extremely clear to him, and I think whoever did that is probably a craphead. I haven't personally, but I guess half of the devs who have worked under/with me keep a copy of the source code on a personal disk or machine. Mostly comes from a place of wanting to reference patterns you used in other projects, or get to know the code at home. Who really cares? He's not doing corporate espionage here. Unless you're working on something truly novel based on internal research, nobody cares what you're building enough to steal it. Most of the stuff we build as professionals isn't applicable to other companies, as it relies on niche internal integrations. Anything well encapsulated that more than a few other companies would find useful probably already has an open source solution that's better than whatever you build. Story 5. On my first day at Target, another new hire jokingly jumped into the cardboard compactor and the boss sent him packing instantly. It wasn't on or anything, they just have a zero-tolerance policy when it comes to jackassery. We'd been on the job for less than an hour, so he made something like $6 total while working for Target. I used to do maintenance for Target. I had locked out/tagged out the cardboard baler due to a faulty hydraulic line. Came in the next day and found my tool cage unlocked and my lockout lock cut. The overnight manager used his keys on my cage to get the bolt cutters because I was the only key holder for my lock. He was let go immediately. They did not mess around with safety on that level. Here in Sweden, we are pretty strong on worker protection, and it's rather hard to fire someone. Very few things will result in someone being told to GTFO immediately, and sabotage of safety equipment is one of those. I started a new job a few years ago, and my direct manager had only been on the job for a few weeks. The previous manager had been fired effective immediately after cutting the cables for the loud alarm to alert everyone of heavy machinery moving automatically. He had been apparently working nearby and got tired of the loud alarm. Oddly enough, this reminds me of an episode of Ice Road Truckers. They were introducing a new guy who was a sort of a no-nonsense old salt kind of person who was quite colorful and interesting. Except on his first run, he was getting into all sorts of technical issues. The staff at the stop hooked up his air brakes wrong somehow and kept delaying him while they figured it out. and when they finally realized what they'd done and got things ready, he climbed up into the cab only to find out that for whatever reason, the seatbelt won't release the tensioner. He can't actually pull the belt out to put it on and buckle it up. He'd have happily just gone without the belt, except the owning company made sure the trucks were equipped with a system so the trucks wouldn't move, or not quickly, without the belt clipped in place. Rather than waiting for the maintenance people to figure it out, he just grabs a hammer and beats the hell out of the buckle mechanism until it breaks entirely and clicks into place. So he's basically driving without a seatbelt. On a company truck, on TV. Yeah, he was out in only one episode. Story 6. I hired a temp for data input. On her first day, a guy pulled me aside and said, "She can't be here." Apparently one of our full-time employees had a restraining order against her. I sent the employee home and apologized, then called her agency and told them she was not welcome back. Not sure what the order was for, but my guess is stalking. I worked as a staffing firm manager for 18 years. She definitely knew where he worked if he had a restraining order on her and she didn't turn down the job. She could have always told us, "I can't do that one as my ex works there." Better than losing a customer because she failed to tell us, and now the client is like, "X, the agency sends out girls with restraining orders. Let's not use them again." Reminds me of a friend who works as a consultant. Boss sends him an email saying, "Hey, going to put you on job X. They require drug testing. If you won't pass, come and see me." They say yes, and so do other people. Half a dozen of them got sent over, and one promptly fails the drug test. Boss promptly fires him for making the company look bad. He gave absolutely no crap that the guy smoked weed, but he freaking told him he had to take a test. All he had to do was go, "Yo, not the client for me." People did it all the time if they didn't want to undergo security clearances or take drug tests. It really didn't matter unless they showed up anyway and failed. I've seen the same happen with criminal record/DBS checks. You are always fully aware that your record is going to be checked as you have to consent to it in progress of your application. The companies and government departments I've worked for have always made it clear that a conviction won't necessarily prevent you from being offered. If it wasn't very recent or a crime of violence, theft, or fraud, it shouldn't be an issue. As long as you declare the conviction, that is, something like 30% of adult males in the UK have a criminal conviction, it's hardly an unusual scenario. I've seen several very promising potential employees being offered a job dependent on checks being completed. Occasionally, they'd even started, and we were in training when the DBS checks came back. They were always informed in detail that you must be honest when declaring convictions/lack of convictions. And then they ticked the box to declare that they have no convictions, despite knowing full well that they were done for driving without insurance 15 years ago or possession of a Class B substance 25 years ago. So immediately the job offer was rescinded, or they were escorted from the premises and fired. So stupid. Story 7. The dishwasher pooped his pants and then kept washing dishes. We had a dishwasher show up for a shift. Not his first day though, and kept bending over in pain, grabbing his groin. The manager finally asked what was going on, and he pulled his apron back to show blood that soaked through his pants. The dishwasher was a total stoner, and he owed money to a dealer who sliced his sack open with a razor for not paying. The manager rushed him to the hospital to get his sack stitched up. Spicoli, the name we gave him, I don't even remember his real name, dabbled in everything. Was on parole for drugs and dropped acid before our summer party. The night he quit there were 2 police officers at the bar paying for their dinner, and one of the cooks thought it'd be funny to point them out to him and say that they were asking about him. Spicoli ran out the back door and never returned. The cook, Eddie, thought it was hilarious until he ended up washing the dishes that night. I assume whoever sliced him held him down. As a teen, I worked as a dishwasher. One of my fellow dishwashers was disabled, and something about his rear end didn't fully develop. Well, his bio parents apparently locked him in the basement 24/7, where he was only allowed to watch Power Rangers. He was basically a prisoner for the majority of his childhood and had virtually zero interaction until he was removed from his home and placed with a foster family. Well, this individual would randomly disappear for hours at a time at work. I questioned management one day, and they informed me that he would periodically poop himself and have to be excused to be cleaned up, which involved his foster family coming and cleaning him up. All around, he was a good kid given the crappy, pun intended, circumstances he was raised in. Story 8. I was working at a large-scale architectural firm in the Bay Area in 2004, and they hired a new guy after his orientation and paperwork. He finally got to his cubicle. The first thing he does is put on his headphones and blast death metal. Cannibal Corpse so loud that everyone can hear, and that's him using headphones. However, that did not get him fired. His first work item was to write a company-wide email that said Debbie Harry of Blondie was responsible for 9/11 and wrote about 30,000 words for it. I have never seen our HR manager run out of her office so fast. Story 9. First day, IT guy made his computer's desktop wallpaper a Facebook pic of a female coworker he had just met. Reminds me of a story I heard. A dude was hired as a tester in the IT department. Apparently he made an Excel file and ranked all the women in the company. There were a lot, from most to least bangable. He didn't realize that the OneDrive was shared with the entire company, over 300 people, and clearly said who had created the document. It's one thing to be creepy as hell like that. Like, okay, I guess there are just weird psychopaths everywhere, but to do something like that using company resources? How freaking stupid do you have to be? Like, how did he even get an IT job if he didn't understand the possibility that that might get leaked everywhere? That's what baffles me the most. I worked for a company that had people creating who was the hottest brackets that got passed around between guys, where each round there would be a head-to-head competition to see who was the hottest female, and guys would vote. The winner would move on to the quarters, semis, and finals. There would be an unofficial champ that never got notified. I don't know how those guys didn't get fired. Pretty good-sized company too. Happened about 6 years ago. I heard this story secondhand, but I have another IT story. At this school district, IT had access to the IT guy uses HRIS to get the home address of the executive assistant who is married. The IT guy then brings up in normal conversation to the executive assistant that he recently passed by her house and started talking about details of the house. She had never mentioned where she lived, nor would she. He didn't last long. Story 10. He was a first-day blackjack dealer. He took in $5 cash and exchanged it for a $500 chip. The lady stared at him for a good 20 seconds, picked up her chip, and left the building. Gaming took his badge shortly after. I got double paid on a blackjack table one time. I was young and did something dumb and split tens, and I ended up hitting blackjack on both. It caused a commotion at the table, and the dealer paid me out but didn't scoop my cards. Then the dealer busted and paid everyone, including me again. Everyone at the table noticed, but no one said anything. The dealer was not notified, and I took the extra pay and left. I was a new server having a busy as heck shift, and I remember giving a grandfather of a family 2 5s in his book as change. I can't remember how they were. It was a busy Sunday. I do know everything was routine on my end. I remember him sitting there and looking at me real hard. I was hoping he'd leave something fat. At first, I thought I just got stiffed on a 5 top, which is lame. But at the end of the night, I realized he stole from me too. I had to laugh. Much less of an offense, but working in a movie theater, we didn't have registers that figured out our change for us, just how much something cost, so naturally we sometimes made mistakes, and this lady who had handed me a $20 bill, I gave her $40 back thinking she'd given me a $50 or something, and she took it hesitantly, but then split, and her reaction made me realize I'd messed up. At least I told the manager about it, but he was like, "We short a lot here." Always makes me wonder how much of that comment was like, "I'm taking from the register." Story 11. Dishwasher. First day on the job, went on break and went to the bar next door. Took a while to come back, so the chef went and found him. We needed a dishwasher bad, and he was actually pretty damn quick at doing dishes. Chef gives him a second chance. The second day goes on break again and stops at 7-Eleven, gets a tall boy of Mike's Hard and starts drinking it right outside the back door. We have a picnic table right outside our back door for staff to eat/smoke. The chef finds him again and fires him on the spot. The sad part is, my chef probably wouldn't have given a crap if he was always drunk. It was the fact that he didn't even try to hide it. Sounds like he was trying to get fired. His parents made him get a job and he wanted them to keep supporting him. Nah man, most likely just an alcoholic. I met some people like that in the restaurant industry. At one place I worked, the chef hired an old high school buddy of his as a dishwasher. I don't know if he had always been dumb, or if it was just a result of 20+ years of heavy drinking, but he was very slow on the uptake. One time during the middle of a dinner shift, he walked up to the restaurant's bar and tried to order a beer. The bartender, who was also the FOH manager, was like, "Dude, no, you need to get back to work." I'm not sure if the guy totally understood he was out of line, or if he was just that desperate for a drink. The weirdest part of this story to me is that you can buy liquor from a 7-Eleven. Here you have to go to a liquor store and show ID to get in. Costco has to put its liquor in a physically separate building from the rest of the store with its own checkouts. Kitchen staff being drunk or high 24/7 is very much still a thing though. My chef literally told me he doesn't care if I smoke joints on my break, just walk to the end of the alley first. The Mike's Hard referenced in the story is a type of alcoholic lemonade. Even though most 7-Elevens won't sell liquor, they will sell lighter drinks like beer, alcoholic lemonade, and alcoholic sparkling water. And realistically, a single can of Mike's Hard isn't going to make a seasoned alcoholic too drunk to function, so the dude probably did find a restaurant eventually that was fine with him drinking like that on his breaks. I've worked in probably 100 different restaurants and bars over the past 15 years, and I can't fathom someone getting fired for drinking a tall boy. Maybe a finger shaking, if that. I don't know that I've ever met a BOH employee who wasn't on something, lol. In one of my first jobs, we used to sneak over to the bar next door and take shots of Rumplemints because it's minty and won't leave an alcohol smell on your breath. We called it mouthwash, lol. One place I worked always had a handle of bourbon stocked in the kitchen. They used it in some of the recipes, and the cooks would regularly pass around shots in plastic ramekins and offer one to anyone who happened to be in the kitchen at the time. This was a fine dining place, and nobody cared as long as customers didn't see. At another place, High Volume Sports Pub, the manager would wait until 9 or 10 p.m. and then give the signal for me to mix a couple of whiskey cokes for him and myself. 90% of the clubs I've worked at had a culture of sneaking shots behind the bar, letting customers buy you drinks, and passing around weed pens. When I did banquet bartending, none of us would leave a gig sober. Even in the place where I work now, the chefs sometimes smoke blunts out back. It's just the culture. This guy would have been wholly unremarkable at any place I've worked. Story 12. I worked in a kitchen and a new guy came in. I asked him to grab something from our cleaning supply storage, which was in a shed out back. He was gone for a while, so I took a look at the cameras, and he was smoking a blunt while peeing in the shed right next to the cleaning supplies. Yeah, honestly, I'm not surprised. My first kitchen job had a sea can out back for storage, and the cooks used to get me to watch the door while the two of them crushed a 12-pack every morning in 10 minutes or less. They had my ass doing fireball shots and smoking doinks with them half an hour into my first shift as a dish. Thank God I don't have the degen bone in my body, but some places are just like that. The 17-year-old me didn't mind. It wasn't even a bar, just some diner that was really popular with truckers and church crowds. The blunt probably seemed like a no-brainer. I can't explain the pissing though, probably just absolutely hammered. I honestly liked working in a joint like that because no matter how hungover I showed up, I was still the golden child. It let me live my best 18-year-old life. It also kept things interesting. Highlights include guy always eating out of the dish bins, despite my constant offers to make him whatever he wanted. He just liked soggy bread, I guess. New hire that was an obvious meth head and 5'1" mouthpiece got into it with me during the dinner rush and decided to follow me when I took the garbage out one night. Old Turkish prep cook sees him follow me out and follows too just in time to see my buddy take a swing at me. Prep cook helps me throw him in the dumpster. 20 minutes later, a waitress comes in from a smoke and says he's sitting out back crying. Opening shorthanded at 5 a.m. and I'm helping my only help make a fort out of the bread racks because he's too drunk to stand and insists he just needs a nap. Line cook wearing a Rolex to work showing off the receipt for $20K. At the job he made $12 an hour. He's in prison for 3D printing guns and selling drugs now. I eventually moved on and worked at actual decent restaurants, and it was such an adjustment. I kind of missed the chaos of working at a dive. Your guy would have fit right in there. I see a whole lot of comments like this about working in the restaurant industry in particular. May I ask if this is normal or otherwise uncommon? I'm an engineer, and it's not common for us at all. But I have had one coworker across a few companies who was infamous for things worse than this. More on the level of disappearing for weeks at a time while out of town on business, with a hotel and company paid for a rental car. A rental car that gets impounded for being abandoned and the guy gets arrested because it had meth in it, etc. Story 13. I was a bartender and it was his first day of training. He smacked my ass when I was bent over to get ice. I flipped out on him and he got fired in front of me. Bartender here. I made a comment on this post, but I'll tell my story again. A new dishwasher was hired. Within 1 hour of him working, he had videotaped me on his phone, made kissing noises at me, and then decided to grab my breast. I didn't even get a chance to say hi, introduce myself, or even get his name. This man decided to straight up SA me. I threatened to stab him and push him down the stairs. He was fired immediately. Unfortunately for our industry, we get a lot of S offenders, violent criminals, all the BS. Had something similar when I was 14 years old. As a dishwasher at the local diner in my hometown, they hired a new waitress who would make innuendos or flat-out essay statements every time she walked by me. Example, I was putting away a rack of mugs and said, "Excuse me, I just need to slide this in here real quick." And she replied, "Oh yeah, stick it all the way in there, big boy." Again, I was 14 and she was in her 40s. Also, not that it should make a difference, but no, she was not attractive. Story 14. The nurse who failed his drug test on the first day. He did the tests days prior, and we got the results on his first day. He replied, "Yeah, I thought that might happen," and he was told he failed his UDS. Just turned around and walked out. At the store I used to work at, 3 people started on the same day. One was walking out during his first break because the results came back and he had failed his drug test. The second guy was walking at lunchtime for the same reason. The third guy ended up working there for years. We had this, but it was with background checks during COVID. There were significant delays in getting the reports back, so we were starting staff on orientation while we waited for the results. I know of at least one convicted felon who had to be pulled off the floor and sent home. My friend's husband got a job at a sporting goods warehouse through a temp agency. He walked out the first day because they brought out a huge pallet of ammo for him to price, and he's like, "I can't touch that, I'm a convicted felon." The supervisors were shocked because the temp agency should never have allowed him to get a job there in the first place. They don't hire felons at all because of the guns and ammo they sell. The temp agency knew that he was a felon, but the person working with him thought it was okay because he hasn't had any trouble in over 15 years. Then he had to convince them to let them sit in the lobby instead of waiting outside to be picked up because there was a tornado warning and it was headed straight for them. As soon as it passed, they made him go outside. Reminds me of when I went through Air Force boot camp. About 2 weeks in, one of the star members of my group happened to be in the bathroom at the same time as me. I'd never said more than 2 words to the guy the whole time, but he suddenly felt the need to describe to me how he smoked the biggest blunt he'd ever smoked in his life the week before we all shipped out. I was very confused at this confession, but just laughed and shrugged it off. Literally a few days later, he was gone. The official reason was that he failed the drug test we were all required to take at the processing center the day we shipped out, as the results had finally come in. Honorable mention to the guy who made it about the same length of time and was kicked out for them realizing he had a massive tattoo of the Air Force logo that extended upward far enough that it was out of regulations as it would be visible in uniform. My uncle was looking for work for a while and smoked weed the whole time he was waiting, like 6 months for the job he wanted. He is really smart with money, so it wasn't an emergent job need. I was trying to plan something with him and he said I should be at work, but who knows how this drug test is gonna go. I stopped smoking the day I got the interview and got some stuff to flush it out, but we will see. I could see him having that response. Story 15. Graphic designer. Didn't know how to use a mouse. She was an older lady who had done graphic design back in the 70s or 80s when it was mainly analog, and she was just getting back into the workforce after her kids had moved out, not realizing that 100% of the work was now digital. Nice person, everyone was sad that she had to be let go. I was a contractor for this company, not directly employed, and only heard of it firsthand from the director of the department. Similar story, late 90s, I got a PhD, whose dissertation was spot on and applicable to a government research organization where I supplied personnel. Sent him to the site and they called me to tell me he couldn't turn on a computer and had no idea what Microsoft Office and Word were. I called him and he explained that the paper he had shown me that he had authored was his thoughts, but created by his grad students. They handled all the computer stuff. He was practically useless outside of an academic setting. Smart guy, but not smart enough in the skills we needed. I had a new hire admin and she took tests for appropriate skills in the Office suite. I had to show her how to select a row/column in Excel every day, and then she accused me of bullying when I sighed and said we just went over this. I know her boyfriend had to have taken the at-home tests. I'd say select column A and she'd just click on cell A1 and stop, wait and look at me. I was so patient for the first 10 times I showed her, but she never understood. She also stole off of other people's desks. Nothing expensive, just stuff she didn't think would be noticed, but that any sane human would notice. Someone had these magnetic balls in a bunch, as a fidget on his desk, and after hours, she stole half of them like he wouldn't notice. It took me months of complaining to higher-ups to get her dismissed. She literally did nothing other than make my work harder for the entire time she was there. Similar situation, I had a temp come in who started off the day asking me extremely basic questions about how to use the layout software. After about an hour of this, I went to my boss and told her that I had too much of my own work to do, which is why we hired a temp to begin with, and I didn't have time to train someone on how to use the software. The temp was asked to leave before noon. The thing is though, we hired this temp through a design staffing agency that tested people on the use of the software. The tests weren't hard for someone who had any experience doing design work on a computer, but rigorous enough that this woman shouldn't have gotten through. So I have no idea how this woman managed to be hired by the staffing agency to be assigned to us. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you would like to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.